Hey, what's up you guys? You're watching Team APS, and in today's video, we're going to talk about our favorite eras in Yu-Gi-Oh! So let's get started. So the idea of an era is kind of, I guess, a little bit vague and tough to define, but you could basically define it as just sort of like your favorite arc in terms of like the anime and what that did for the game. So like some people will say like, you know, the 5Ds era, or they might call it like the Synchro era, or they might maybe define it as more of a format. So you know, the 5Ds era had sort of several phases of top decks. You know, like it kind of started with Teledad and then shifted to Blackwings and shifted to Cat Synchro, then sort of shifted to like Plant Synchro toward the end, and then like this sort of Six Samurai. So like there are phases, and like, you know, Zexal has its own, Arc 5 is sort of having its own. So it wasn't, you can't necessarily say it's just the Xyz era. So what I'm asking today is basically what are your favorite parts or your favorite eras in Yu-Gi-Oh! And why? So, what is mine? Well, it's actually kind of a tough question. I've liked certain things about every single era of Yu-Gi-Oh! The original, of course, you know, blah, introduced the game, duh, easy one. But, I think that they all have their own benefits, so maybe I'll just sort of reveal mine at the end. But I think that the GX era offered a lot of value. It was the first era to really use archetypes. I mean, archetypes had sort of vaguely existed before then, but they were kind of just loosely connected monsters, and maybe Gravekeepers was about the furthest that really got. It was mostly just, you know, good standalone cards, you know, whatever you would consider like Breaker the Magical Warrior and kind of Giant Rat Age, and there were varying ages with that, so you know. But I think the GX was definitely the one that brought archetypes to the table. Outside its Elemental Heroes, that's kind of where we got the Cyber Dragons and Cyber Darks and, you know, Cloudians and Venoms and Aliens and all these cool archetypes. Now, granted, these archetypes, Crystal Beasts are another good one, still kind of popular today, but granted, these archetypes, all of them aren't necessarily memorable, and they certainly did not handle the test of time very well. I mean, they were kind of, many of them are poorly designed, stuff like Venoms and, you know, Volcanics at that time. Just weren't, I mean, they were very rough ideas. This is probably when Konami wasn't exactly sure exactly how balancing would go for some of these archetypes. They just were kind of more like, oh, rather be safe than sorry type of thing. But yeah, a lot of those decks didn't really have much. They didn't last very long, and I don't know how fun that era really was to play. I mean, I only played kind of towards the end of it, kind of the Lightsworn, Dark Arm Return type of end of it, so I can't say as much about it. 5Ds brought Synchros though, and that's really cool because Synchros were probably the point where a lot of people stopped liking Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, you know, a lot of those, you know how Pokemon has like the Gen 1ers, kind of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Classic nutheads who are just like, yeah, you know, if it's not, you know, Dark Magician and Giant Rat and all that, then it's not good. Those people, yeah, 5Ds is probably the era that for a lot of them like turned them off. They didn't understand Synchros and know what it was about. But Synchros made this game really exciting. Definitely the pace got upped in the 5Ds era in general. I would say that you know, like it's kind of when combos really began to happen. Combos between individual cards that were really good, and kind of plays led to more plays. Your turn didn't always end with just like a summon and an effect. It was kind of more like, you know, a summon led to another summon, led to a pit, and a special, and a bounce, and a spin, and like other things happened. You made a synchro, then maybe something came back, and then you made another synchro. You know, the idea of cards like, you know, Junk Synchron, Debris Dragon, cards that, you know, brought stuff back from the grave, and Recursion, and later, you know, we got things like Doppel Warrior. You know, the stuff where it got very, there's more like, I think you guys get what I'm saying. You know, there's more of a combo deck type of feel to it, and I think that was really cool. That's one of the things I actually really liked about the 5Ds era. Now, the Zexal era is where Xyz came, and that's where I think a lot of the power creep problems started. So not to say I don't like it, but you know, I feel like that is when the archetypes got to get really consistent. The game got entirely sort of archetype based. That was sort of the point where if you weren't running many of these archetypes, you weren't really doing well. But Xyz sounding was really interesting. I think that it made the game fun because it kind of helped a lot of older decks. Older decks that couldn't really reliably synchro could still sometimes reliably Xyz summon. So we saw that things like maybe Gravekeepers, there's still a decent, you know, rank 4 deck, and Gadgets were too, and also just decks like Crystal Beasts, you could kind of make versions of them that could use things like Lightning Chidori really well, because Pegasus and the other thing are like wind. So the Zexal era was cool in that way. It definitely kind of, obviously it has one of the strongest sort of formats in the game, the Dragon Ruler versus Spellbook format. I think that's definitely one of the more memorable ones. But it did definitely show how far Konami is willing to go to make a deck consistent and make a deck powerful. I mean, we saw things like Big Eye and Dracosack and Dragon Rulers, and that got really nutty. And I mean, here we thought like Fire Fist and Mermos are really strong, and then we got like Dragon Rulers and Spellbook. So it really just, it definitely kind of showed Konami's, I don't want to say benevolence, but I mean, you know, there is certainly willing to make things crazy. So that was that, and now we're in the Arc 5 era, which is very, so far, I can't say I'm like enjoying it, but I've sort of begun to adapt to pendulums. We're seeing pendulums, we're seeing them become more prominent in the game. We're starting to see the more generic, powerful effects of them. Things like Archfiend Eccentric, things like, you know, Luster Pendulum, and several upcoming cards that are, you know, I don't want to say abusing, but really putting the pendulum mechanic through its paces, showing you why this is a very powerful mechanic. And we're getting to that point where, you know, a lot of the top decks are going to be pendulum decks. You know, the Magicians, everyone talks about, Magispectors, they're all coming, it's all in play. We already have to deal with the Cleaforts and stuff. And so, you know, the pendulum thing is getting bigger, and I don't know that, you know, that's a good or bad thing. Some people probably have differing views, but so what is your favorite era? Is it a specific format of one of these eras, or is it just kind of an era as a whole? I mean, so far I'd say like with Arc 5, for example, we've kind of had the Duelist Alliance era, you know, Burning Abyss, Shaddoll, Satellar Knights, and those decks have been relevant for about a year now. And that's kind of the first era, and now we're maybe entering the second part of it, where those decks are likely about to get crept out, and, you know, Perform Age and Magicians and Magispectors and all that stuff is going to kind of be the next one. So what do we, you know, what is your favorite? And I'd say, for me, it's a bit of a toss-up between the 5Ds and the Zexal era. 5Ds introduced a lot of archetypes that I really do like. It introduced like X-Sabers, which are my favorite, but also it introduced Blackwings, is one that I really liked, and I really enjoyed Blackwings. I really enjoyed Scraps. The synchroing mechanic for me was generally very fun. It made the game feel, like I said, a little bit faster paced, a little bit more like you never quite knew where your opponent was going with their turn. Like, they might kind of surprise you and synchro summon into something that you didn't expect. So like, whereas before, when you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh, you kind of just saw a play coming as it happened. But in 5Ds, you know, when your opponent put a bunch of little monsters on the board and there was a tuner or two with them, you never knew where things were going to go. It was very exciting. And, you know, when cards like Trishula came out, it got very scary because so many decks could make level 9 out of nowhere, and I would always be playing it, and I'd be like, oh, I'm not going to get Trished. And like a random deck could make a Trish, and like I was just like, what? Like, how did this happen? And so that was very cool, because you might have been expecting Stardust, and then they make Scrap Dragon or a Colossal Fighter or Thought Ruler, and so you might be expecting a Black Rose, but they actually make a this or that. And so I thought that was very cool. And Zexal sort of continued that. I think that Zexal simplified things a little bit. And the effects of the Xyz monsters as opposed to Synchro monsters, they do feel more like outs. I think that, you know, that's definitely something that's maybe good, maybe bad. I think a lot of people say, like, you know, the rank 4 toolbox everybody talks about feels more like an out than a than tools. Like, I feel like, you know, when you summon synchros, you're usually moving a strategy forward. You're moving your deck strategy forward. But when you summon Xyz monsters, oftentimes it's, you know, or at least it's come down to being like Castel, Abyss Dweller, Rhapsody, Exodus Knight, big one. So they're kind of more outs. So it's a toss between them. I'm not sure which one I like more. And I kind of want to lean towards Zexal because I've more actively kept up with the game during that era. But the Synchro era was kind of when I began to play more competitively and travel more. So it's hard to say. And I will end with the note that I'm really glad Konami has made the game finally get to a point where every summoning mechanic is sort of equally represented. There are several different decks that fusion summon and in different ways. Like Masked Heroes do it one way, Ritual Beasts do it another way, Shaddolls do it, you know, like there are a lot of different fusion things. You still got stuff like Gym Knights and Fluffles out there. And then you've got ritual summoning represented, obviously in Necroz, but also just ritual Rituals in general are getting more support. Prediction Princess is kind of supported a little bit. And, you know, stuff like that. We've gotten archetypes like Gishki that prove that ritual summoning can be a balanced but very powerful mechanic. And then, you know, every deck can Xyz summon, a lot of decks can Synchro summon, and so it's really very balanced, I will say, and that's something that I like. So, what is your favorite era? What is your favorite era, and why? Explain it in the comments. Is it a particular sort of like 5D, Zexal, Arc 5s, GX, or original, or is it more like a format, a certain format? Because like I will say, you know, my favorite formats, or I think like I liked 2010 a lot. All the formats in 2010 were very exciting to me. And I also liked Fire Fist Mermail format. It's pretty exciting one for me too. So yeah, it's very interesting. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Explain it a bit. Feel free to like kind of argue or share opinions with other people. I like interaction in the comments. It's great. Anyways, that's gonna be the video. I hope you guys liked it. Remember to follow me on social networks. Catch my Twitch live streams, all the good stuff. And yeah, I will catch you guys later. See ya.